This is my public message to all those arrogant assholes who think they are better men, better lovers, or just better than some unsuspecting bitch's husband. Be careful, I'm here looking for you, and you bitches, beware too. Isn't equality a wonderful thing? It's not pretty, and it doesn't have a happy ending, but it's true nonetheless. That's right, bastards, I'm here, and I'll take the revenge of my deceived husband. You see, I was once that husband. A husband who fell in love with a lying, cheating, backstabbing bitch, and that's my story. And your fair warning. First of all, I won't bore you with how we met, fell in love, and all this trivial nonsense. We did it, got married, and I was ready to live happily for the rest of my days. Now you should know that it wasn't that I was in the war, or had a job that kept me away from home, or anything like that that would give her the excuse. I was so lonely without you. I was just a normal 9 o'clock Joe who loved his wife and couldn't wait to get home. Of course, dear, you can be a housewife. I make enough to keep a roof over my head. No, darling, I don't mind if you go out and have fun with your friends. Just remember, never lie to me, and I hate cheaters. And always remember that little promise you made during that little ceremony that I paid a ton of money for, and that you just had to have. Yeah, I thought you said that, bitch. I may not be the brightest color in the crayon box, but I'm not the dullest either. If I can run a multi-million-dollar industrial store, I can read the writing on the wall. You see, in my honest opinion, in the process of degrading our society, divorce laws have become too simple. Since we don't have children, thank God, all you have to do is fill out a few forms, pay the $150 filing fee, and voila, you're free to have whoever you want, whenever you want. Heck, if you were honest with me and gave me some on the side too, I might give you a pass. Maybe not, but we'll never know now, will we? But no, you forced me to take on the role of an unwilling cuckold. You had to lie to me, go behind my back, and think you could get away with it. Well, little bear doll, I hope the sex was worth it. Just remember that your mother has 2 more children who can give her grandchildren. Maybe, just maybe, they can learn from your mistakes. At least I hope so, for their sake. Oh, just so you know, once I get through mourning, I will find a real woman who loves me enough to be honest and live happily for the rest of her life. But this is neither here nor there. This is about the service I provide to all other unwilling cuckolds who would like to tell their bitches what happened to you and your lover. Well, it's time for me to go. I'm being summoned to court again. I hope you find forgiveness from the Creator, just as I hope the Lord can remove the bitterness from my very broken heart. Your loving husband. Will. I read the letter one more time before tearing it into shreds and throwing it in the nearest trash can. Your Honor, the defense is summoning Mr. William Masters Bates to the dock. The new assistant public defender said with a tired sigh. He knew that he would lose this case. There was too much circumstantial evidence against his client. It didn't matter if he was innocent or not, the system was going to grind him up and spit him out. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? The old bailiff said in his, "I've done this a million times" voice. God help me, the defendant said in a loud, proud voice. Sir, we no longer have to swear to God. Maybe not, but I know for sure. The defendant looked at the judge. I love Christ, a regenerated soul. If I lie, I'll die. You may have removed God from it, but I certainly didn't. I have my eternal soul to worry about, even if you don't care anymore. Amen, someone said from the gallery. Order in the courtroom. The judge slammed his little gavel. There will be no more shouting from the gallery, otherwise it will be cleared. In a private conversation, the judge agreed with the defendant, but he had to keep his mouth shut because of the newfangled nonsense that is considered a legal precedent. You can sit down. The bailiff cast an angry glance at the defendant and returned to his post. Mr. Bates, did you shoot and kill your wife and her lover, Mr. Jamal Warner? The defense lawyer asked a question that he knew needed to be asked right away. No, I didn't shoot, the defendant stated in a clear voice. There are no further questions for this witness at this time. The lawyer sighed and sat down, noting the grins from the prosecutor's table. And from the state? The judge asked. Yes, we have a few questions. A tall, elegantly dressed woman stood up, a predatory and victorious smile on her face. You can continue. The judge was bored, and he knew the jury was bored. He was really surprised that the defendant took the stand because the case against him was very strong. But procedures had to be followed, and he had to give the defense their chance before he could send this piece of human trash back to where it belonged. Mr. Bates, have you been here the last 2 weeks while we were presenting our case? She smiled sweetly. Yes, madam, I was. William nodded yes. And yet, after all the evidence we have presented that proves your obvious guilt, you have the nerve to proclaim your innocence? Her voice sounded with a hint of contempt. It may be because I am not guilty of the crime charged, madam. The defendant didn't even blink. Are you denying that you knew about their affair? She pounced if he wanted to play this game. No, madam. He didn't even flinch. Are you denying that you were extremely angry about the affair? She thought it would be easy. No, madam. Not a single breath changed. Do you deny that you told several witnesses that you believed they should, and I quote, die a horrible death for their betrayal? She grinned, knowing. No, madam, I do not deny. Again, he responded without blinking. And you admit that you have no alibi for the time of the murders? He did her points for her. I don't need an alibi because I didn't commit the alleged crime. He shrugged his shoulders. Only the guilty have to look for an alibi or a way out. The innocent do not have such a burden. He shrugged again. So, getting back to the case, do you accept that we have proven that you had the motive, the means, the opportunity, and the ability to commit these crimes? She started to smile again, but was stopped. Yeah, so what? It still doesn't mean I did it. There was a chuckle from the jury box. Please maintain proper order. The judge bit his lip. You mean? She started to get angry. That you are not proven, madam? William interrupted her. Because you can't, because I'm innocent. That I committed the crime of which I am accused. He leaned forward. You have shown no forensic evidence that I was at the crime scene, in the area, or anywhere other than at my place of work at the time of the crime, or committed any an action indicating the premise that I committed a crime, or that I pulled the trigger of a weapon that ended their life. That's easy to say, since I am innocent of all the charges brought against me. He leaned back with a smile. Your Honor, I want this statement to be stricken from the record, and that the witness be ordered to answer only the questions asked. She gave the defendant a hard look. The objection. She opened the door for his spontaneous testimony with her line of interrogation. His lawyer stood up, smiling. Perhaps his client turned out to be smarter than he thought. Consultation, the prosecutor hissed. Come here. The judge woke up for the first time in days. They argued for several minutes and were sent back. I will allow the statement to stand, but will also caution the witness to limit his answers to the questions asked. There will be no more outbursts on the part of the witness, otherwise he may be found in contempt of court. Does the witness understand? Allow me to speak freely, Your Honor. Mr. Bates looked at the judge. Speak, but keep it to the point. He looked at the witness with a new light. So what you're saying is, I could be held in contempt of court because I have a response to her clearly erroneous and intentionally malicious statements against me in this trial. That you're depriving me of my God-given right to defend my innocence and contradict her misinformation in court when she asks me leading questions, trying to prove my guilt in a crime that I did not commit. I am fighting for my life here, since this is a special circumstance, and yet you, the judge in this trial, forbid me to tell the truth as I see it. Is this what you just ordered me to do, sir? Bailiff, please excuse the jury for a 20-minute break. His eyes narrowed as they left the room. I want to see the witness and the lawyers in my office in 5 minutes. He banged his small hammer loudly and left the room, seething with rage. Once in the office, William did not sit down, but stood at attention in front of the judge. What are you, some kind of prison lawyer? The judge asked, angry. Don't ever pull stunts like that in my courtroom again. What? Defend yourself, Your Honor? William didn't smile. I'm sorry, Your Honor, but that will not happen. I have the right to do so, and I will continue as long as I do not cause undue disturbance to the court. Since I am on the stand giving my testimony, what I said is not considered undue disturbance or even disruptive. I sat quietly while this woman spewed her hatred and misinformation about me for the last 2 weeks. This is my only chance to change this, and I will take it or ask for a retrial. Where the hell did you study law? The judge asked, knowing that what the man said was technically correct. Your Honor, I spent the last 2.5 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit. I lost everything I ever owned because I couldn't afford the $5 million bail that the court set because of their ability or for my alleged guilt. Deliberately high bail due to public pressure on the court due to obvious misinformation spread by the police and the Dawes office about my alleged guilt. I had 16 hours a day to study in the law library at my designated location, without being found guilty of any crime. So I learned as much law as a 6-year-old law student who studies 4 to 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. Of course, I know a lot of theory, but not practical application. Hence, why am I retaining my lawyer, who had the opportunity to work in the judicial system, while I was imprisoned for the last 2.5 years for a crime I did not commit? I don't need your assurances of innocence, the judge growled. Just keeping it on record, Your Honor. William nodded. That, and laying everything I can to support an appeal if there is a conviction in this farce. I've already laid the groundwork for at least 3 different appeals, and will continue to do so until I get a not guilty verdict or a retrial with prejudice in this case. I want my life back, Your Honor, and I'm not willing to wait decades for the court to see its mistakes. How can you say you didn't do it? The woman asked, angry, knowing his guilt. She read the reports and saw the evidence. Because they left too easily for me to do it, he growled at her. If she suffered so much that Christ's crucifixion would seem like a fun day in the park, then and only then would you have to look for me. But they were simply shot while they were minding their own business, dying with a smile on our faces as it was, while I was busy at work, trying to make a living and hoping that I could get over the divorce I was facing. They went away too easily for my liking. He took a few deep breaths to calm himself. But then again, I'm still a little upset right now, all things considered. But you said you didn't have an alibi. The prosecutor looked at William, stunned by the violence in his voice and the truth he implied. No, I said I didn't need an alibi, and I still don't. My God, don't they teach English in law school anymore? You talk about the meanings of words, but you have no idea what the words really mean. William rolled his eyes. I thought that the police, during their investigation, or your office, before going to trial, would have spoken to people in my store who knew where I was at the time of the crime. But these statements were not taken, or at least they weren't handed over during the opening process of this case if they were taken. That's something I was going to bring up on retargeting, Your Honor. The public defender spoke quickly. Are you suggesting that there is some kind of conspiracy in this matter? The judge asked, becoming even angrier. Your words, not mine, Your Honor. William stated flatly. All I know is that Susan Richards, my part's driver, came to see me while I was in prison and told me that she had been spoken to by the police more than 3 times, giving them oral and written statements. However, none of these statements or records of these visits were found during the discovery process. She is also, by the way, the same person that the prosecution used during the grand jury of this farce to prove motive and ability to continue this case. What do you mean? The judge looked at the lawyers, frowning. She's the one who came across the novel, Your Honor. She's the one who informed me about said novel. She's also the one who offered me a place to stay while I decided what to do with the novel. William stated, noting emphasized points on the fingers. She is on our witness list, Your Honor, and can attest to the veracity of Mr. Bates' statements. The public defender rummaged through his papers, looking for the necessary documents. We were going to exclude her, given her obvious affection for the defendant. The prosecutor said quickly, Then exclude any evidence obtained from her testimony, William pounced. In this case, I again ask that the trial be dismissed because all of the state's evidence is based on Mrs. Richard's testimony before the grand jury and could not have been obtained through other means because too many witnesses proved that I was at work at the time of the crime. That's enough, Mr. Bates. The judge hit the table, breathing heavily. I brought you here to hear my remark about your antics in my court, but I am beginning to understand that this was part of your defense. He started drumming his fingers on the table. Unfortunately, you raised some very important legal points, otherwise your ass would already be languishing in your cell. Your Honor, can you? The prosecutor began, seeing that she could have made a mistake. They can't have it both ways, Your Honor. They can't use it in one process and not the other. The public defender got involved. But the judge raised his hand to shut everyone up. It was up to your lawyer to raise these issues, make the appropriate motions, and request procedural changes, reconsideration, or something like that. Your Honor, the public defender began. But you can't take it seriously. The prosecutor said. I said to be silent. He looked at them sternly as William stood there smiling. The judge saw this and knew that regardless of his decision, this case would go on appeal. The precedent had already been set, and everyone knew it. Here is my decision on this damned matter. The judge looked at the lawyers and sighed. Since the jury is seated, you have until 9 tomorrow morning to bring me any, and I mean any, motions to dismiss the case, arguments about witnesses, or motions for a lesser sentence or dismissal of all charges. And yes, there will be double jeopardy applied. I won't let this trial become a laughing stock because someone didn't check their damn papers. He took a deep breath. And you, Mr. Bates, will continue to sit quietly and let your lawyer do his job and not do it for him. Do you understand? Yes, sir. He knew he had just achieved success before the judge and gave in nobly. He knew that no matter how the case turned out, he could get a retrial, file several appeals, or, at best, have all the charges thrown out. He did everything he could. Now is the time to shut up and let things take their course. Jurors were puzzled the next day when they walked in and saw the defendant standing next to his lawyer instead of sitting on the stand. They wondered what would happen next. Things were finally getting interesting. The judge entered, frowned at the defendant, and looked at the prosecutor. Are there any motions that need to be considered before we proceed? He asked rudely. Yes, Your Honor. The female prosecutor looked like she was eating crap while addressing the court. In the interests of justice, the state requests the court to dismiss the charges against the defendant. She looked like she wanted to throw up. Does the state plan to file charges later? The public defender asked, following the prompt and smiling. At the moment, no, she sighed. After reviewing the petition and reviewing the documents presented, I am granting the motion to dismiss all charges. He tapped a wooden block with a hammer. The prosecutor's office has 48 hours to refile charges. If not, then double jeopardy will apply and Mr. Bates cannot be re-prosecuted for this crime. Has everyone understood that? He looked at the stunned faces in court and wanted to groan in disappointment. Yes, Your Honor, they said together. Your Honor, my client requests that his belongings be brought here so that he can be released from the court's detention area. The public defender asked for a tip. Aloud. The judge sighed. At this time, I would like to thank and apologize to the jury. Your service has been invaluable, regardless of how the case was resolved. We ask the jury not to discuss this case until the prosecutor's office reconsiders and refiles the charges against the defendant. Marshal, you may excuse the jury. There was a loud boom as the jury rose to leave. Your Honor, my client has asked me to inform you that he will be at the address provided within the next 72 hours. After that, he will leave the state, as there are no further charges against him in this state, and for obvious reasons, my client is seeking a new start. This will give the state enough time to file any charges and serve them through the proper channels. The public defender knew his job profile had just skyrocketed in the right direction. The state agrees and hopes Mr. Bates will have a good life. The prosecutor said, looking at William with a certain respect. Mr. Bates, while we wait for the jury to leave the courtroom, I would also like to thank you for your order in my court during these proceedings. I know this must have been very stressful for you. I hope I never have to meet you again in my court. Although I would suggest a career in the legal field, perhaps that is something you could excel at." The judge added with muted respect, "Thank you, Your Honor, but I think I just want to find a good, steady job somewhere where I won't be noticed and I can live my life in peace." He nodded and stepped aside to be cuffed one last time. "You may have fooled them, but I know you're guilty as sin, boy." The bailiff hissed as he shackled William. "Aren't we all, sir? Aren't we?" William sighed sadly and wandered to the exit to get to the safe area of the yard. "You might think this is the end of my story. I know I hoped so. But life has a way of hitting you, and all you can do is wince. Over the next 2 years, I did my best to remain invisible. I knew I had a huge target on my back, and there were a lot of people targeting it. Of course, this could be due to the fact that I sued the police, the Dawes office, and everyone who ever touched my case for malpractice and won, which added a target on my back. Well, they called it a settlement, but still, money talks and shit walks the walk. Then again, someone has to hold them accountable for losing people's lives once they get into the system. The day I received my first check from my multi-million-dollar annuity, I cashed it, bought a cheap used car with cash, and disappeared from the card. I didn't speed, jaywalk, or do anything to draw attention to who I was. If I had to show my ID more than 3 times a week, I would move to another city. I wanted anonymity. It didn't help that the news linked my name to any murder involving a black man and a white woman. I never knew there were so many cheaters in the world. All I wanted to do was find a small town with a small church, find love, and live my life in relative peace. But alas, this was not destined to happen. Honestly, I thought I almost made it, but I had to go to this stupid bar. I suppose this is where I will have to bare my soul and admit my real participation in the death of my ex-wife and her lover. Did I kill them? No. Do I have anything to do with their deaths? Oh, hell yeah, you can bet your sweet ass on it. And this is how it happened. I learned about their affair just as you learned at the beginning of this little tragedy. Hell, it's not like they were hiding it. It took me 2 days to figure out what my loving bitch really thought of me, and another 2 days to figure out what I was going to do about it. You see, when you run an industrial parts store, you can meet some very interesting people who have cool toys. James just bought a digital 3D printer. You know, the ones that the TSAF, NSA, and all the other security people are so worried about. Yes, one of those. He made me the perfect pair of tubes to fit my 12-gauge cartridge. Imagine, he was very glad that he allowed me to look at them for a couple of days. This was a one-time deal. Another friend hooked me up to this special spring-loaded loop that is remotely actuated by a tiny electronic servo. The rest was related to mathematics. You see, I knew they would use her bed. It was his business. He wanted to take the woman in the marital bed, talk nonsense to the man, and at the same time have his wife. It's not my fault they weren't more careful. It's not my fault they didn't notice the new decoration on top of my dresser. It's not my fault they bounced on the bed enough times, hard enough to compress the spring. It's not my fault that they committed suicide while I was working hard for a living. No, it was their fault, and I mean entirely their fault, for what happened to them. All they had to do was not have sex on that bed, and they would be alive today. I chose the divorce option without ever touching either of them. But you see, some options come with unexpected costs. It was theirs. No one but me should have had my wife on this bed. And yes, I sleep the sleep of the innocent. I feel no guilt or remorse. They made the choice to betray me in this bed and paid for it. Yes, and for all those who cry. But you said you were a Christian. You can try reading the Bible and see what it says about adultery. This can be instructive. And no, I did not shed innocent blood. In addition, no ballistic weapon was ever found. Ceramics, if they explode, will turn into ceramic dust. When it exploded, it took about 10 more ceramic figurines with it. But he ruined my collection. Hell, I bought them and probably felt like I could destroy them, just like she ruined our marriage. The only thing they could figure out was the trajectory of the shot. The rest, as they say, is history. Anyway, that bar. I was in a small town outside of the big city. I settled down and even dated a very nice woman who attended church. But I, like many guys, wanted a quick drink on Friday after work. I decided that it was safe, since my case had not been mentioned for over 6 months, and that I might be able to relax a little. At the back of the hall, I found a small table with its back to the wall. I bent my long neck and just watched the crowd. Of course, I was close to the bathrooms and the only place where I could make a private phone call. The crowd was mixed, but I wasn't looking for company. "Hey baby, are you going to do this or what?" I heard a tall black man say into his phone. These next words made me angry. "Fuck him if he's not man enough to make you happy." He laughed roughly. I wanted to hit him over the head with a beer bottle, but I restrained myself. I drank another beer and waited, praying to whoever she was that she wouldn't show up. Then she walked through the door and I saw red. I knew her. I knew that her husband had left town on a business trip. I breathed a sigh of relief as she broke away from her admirer and ran out the door. I was ready to put an end to this when he returned to the alcove and made another call. "Hey sexy, did you leave your old man?" he laughed. "No, the prim bitch chickened out. So I'm free if you can go away and have some fun." He listened and then decided his fate. "So what? Make a weakling raise my child if you're ready to reproduce." I panted and followed him out the back of the club while he was still talking to the bitch on the phone. I found a metal pipe and started beating him. The only thing that saved me was that I was wearing work gloves, because the night was cold. I wrapped the phone in my jacket and quickly returned to the car. By the time I was 5 miles away, I was calm enough to know it was time to move again. I called my boss, told him the crap, and quit my job. By the time the body was identified, I was already in another state. I took the car to the car wash and traded it for something else. My clothes and pipe ended up in some body of water, which I crossed in the middle of the night. It was the first and last time I lost control like that. But it was also a clarifying moment. I knew that if I wasn't caught, I would be chosen to take revenge on all those poor souls who married the wrong women. Now I have to tell you that I am not singling out black men or men for that matter. I mean, if both do the deed, then both can pay the price, right? This seemed fair to me, given my state of mind. Did I really go out and have to look for these scammers? Hell no, they fell from the trees like apples in the fall. Wherever I stayed, I ran into scammers. I couldn't go to dinner or a bar without running into them. Now, given my time studying the legal system, and once I gained clarity, I realized that no two people are the same, or that's what they call a pattern killer. Since I'm not a killer, there's a big difference. I am justice for the offended. Believe me, if I found out that my husband knows and approved, then let them begin fun and games. This is not my style, but I do not judge, let me not be judged. To be honest, I didn't judge those who eventually met their maker. I just sped up their meeting with the final judge. You need to understand that even if I didn't make a diagram of how they met the maker, the one thing I insisted on after that first time was that they be caught in the act in order for justice to come. No doubtful moments for me. Equal justice for all. This is, or was, the American way, okay? Now you know the whole story, and you can stop twitching. I said to the couple squirming on the bed. Your guilt is obvious, and there is always a price for every choice you make. I think someone should have taught you this before, but rest assured, your families will survive the shame and support each other. They won't be blamed as they stand in the countryside with real friends and family, just like you. Stop twitching, otherwise the superglue will only hurt you. As soon as I leave the room, the gas will keep you asleep until you only know sleep, which you pushed aside on the way to sex. It will only have your fingerprints on it. It will look like murder-suicide, but you will know that justice has been served. I turned the valve and softly closed the door to the secluded bungalow. They struggled for a minute until the gas did its job. I wrote out a list of names in large letters in red paint, leaving the stencils behind. The names of those who were known lovers of this pair of cheaters are a warning. I knew this was the list that would make this case famous. I sighed, knowing it was time to move again. I was no longer looking for work. It seems like someone gave me a full-time job, whether I wanted it or not. So, in hopes of getting some time off from my new job, I am making this public announcement for all you cheaters out there. Justice exists, and I am watching. Cross me, and justice will be served cold, just like the two I left in that room a few hours ago. Oh, and for all those who call themselves Christians, try reading Leviticus, which says, "If two are caught in adultery, let them both be brought in, testify against them, and stoned to death." And then look in Mark where Christ says, "In heaven there is neither marriage nor marriage." And don't forget those pesky vows. Therefore, whom God has joined together, let no man separate. And you can do the math yourself. As for me, if I am to be judged, then let me be judged only by the judge who matters. This ends this public statement. You can go on with your day. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.